Hello!
Nepal, a small Himalayan country, is the same size as the state of Florida or the country of Greece, and has 8 of the world's highest 10 mountains in it. After doing the challenging 3 passes Everest Base Camp trek and resting for a few days in Kathmandu, Cece and I headed out with Tule, our guide, to combine the Tsum Valley and Manaslu treks. The Tsum Valley Trek offers a chance to explore a rarely visited valley rich with Tibetan Buddhist culture that has been open to trekkers only since 2008, while the Manaslu Trek circles around Mount Manaslu, the 8th highest mountain on Earth, with a great blend of stunning scenery, monasteries, and traditional villages. Both treks require a guide as you are in restricted areas, so we set out with Tule to combine 2 of the most beautiful treks in all of Nepal. Transportation in Nepal is always an adventure, and just getting to the start of the trek often tests your patience. We got out to the bus terminal at sunrise and hopped on our little bus. The distance from Kathmandu to Machakola is about 100 miles or 160 kilometers. In many countries, this might take an hour or 2. However, in Nepal, it most certainly doesn't. Local people got on and off as we made over 100 stops over the next 10 hours as people packed our sweaty bus, hung out the doors, and even sat on top. Finally, around 5 p.m., we got off as a truck was stuck in the road and we had to walk the final 3 miles into the town the bus was supposed to drop us off in. On top of that, the skies opened up and it poured on us for the final mile. We were off to an adventurous start and the trekking hadn't even truly begun. That evening and the next morning I talked with the guest house owners, and thankfully we lined up a local jeep to take Cece and I to Sirdibas, which would cut off about 17 miles of road hiking, which isn't always that scenic. So at 7 a.m. we jumped on the back of a local jeep because the seats inside were already full.
Hello, hi!
We took off as the jeep bumbled its way up the rugged road. We got into a couple of traffic jams with local shepherds who were cruising up the road with their flocks of sheep. With a narrow mountain road and nowhere to move, we inched our way up through the herds until finally we could make it past them. Although we didn't have to carry our packs, it was still a tiring workout, simply keeping ourselves stable on the uncomfortable little makeshift benches in the back of the jeep. We looked down on massive drop-offs down to the river and went under little waterfalls that trickled down from the cliffs above. The jeep powered through streams and by little villages as we made our way up the road. Finally, after over 3 hours of holding on and bouncing up the treacherous road, we had reached the end, and we hopped off and threw our packs on. No more transportation. Now it was finally time to officially start trekking. We crossed the river and headed up to Philam.
Hello!
The trail rolled along until we got to the split for the Manaslu to the left and Tsum Valley to the right, and we officially entered the much less visited Tsum Valley. After another mile or 2, we made it up to Lokpa, where we decided to stay. After so much transportation, it was nice to chill out in the afternoon and get a full dinner of dal bhat. After doing the Everest 3 passes loop completely solo, Tsum Valley and Manaslu circuits are in restricted areas, which requires a guide. So we had Tule, a nice local guide from a village of Laprak, to keep us company. The next morning we were up at 6, having our breakfast at 6:30, and on the trail at 7, which would become our standard schedule for the trek. We quickly made our way out of Lokpa. While the Tsum Valley Trail is not nearly at the high altitudes of the Everest area, there are still lots of ups and downs on the trail, making it not fast moving. We made our way up hundreds of concrete stairs and across rusty metal bridges that were perched onto the side of the mountain that we prayed wouldn't collapse while we were walking across them. The trail climbs its way alongside the river, and we steadily gained elevation as we made our way up towards Chumling.
Doing good?
The Tsum Valley area is quiet, as not many trekkers come up this way. Visiting Tibetan China is not that easy, with travel permits and being required to be on a tour. So the Tsum Valley region gave us a chance to see and interact with the local people, who speak a Tibetan dialect and live in a very similar way to those just across the border. We continued on, crossing classic giant Nepali suspension bridges and going by stray dogs. Many people stay in Chumling, but it was still morning and we continued past the little village, unsure of where exactly we would get to today. Tsum Valley is remote and inhabited by small groups of people who are of Tibetan origin, and there are only a few villages which have operating tea houses in them, so we would need to be constantly calculating our mileage to make sure we did end each day in one of these tiny outposts. By 1 p.m. we had made it to Dramba, with a couple little homes, and thankfully just past Dramba, the Renzum guest house was open, and a little family made us some lunch in their basic kitchen. It was only us there, and Tuli and I hung out in the kitchen as the man prepared our potato and spaghetti lunch. If the kitchen isn't already running, lunch will usually take nearly an hour to prepare.
Looks good.
So we had a solid hour-plus lunch break before getting back on the trail for one of the steepest sections on the Tsum Valley route. The trail rolls along for a bit before heading straight uphill to gain 2,500 feet over a couple of miles up to the village of Chekumpar. We were grateful that it was a cloudy afternoon as we sweated our way up the solid incline. As we entered Chekumpar, we came up to a potato patch that was full of langur monkeys digging out the potatoes and getting some easy food. We found a place to stay in the quiet Bio Hotel, hosted by Karma, a sweet local lady
Hello!
and her father-in-law who tended to the livestock.
It's fun staying in these little villages here. Tonight we're in Chekumpar at 10,000 feet. Got these old rustic looking guest houses that are really cool.
I dropped off our things and headed out, as I often do in the afternoons, to stroll around the village, observing the Tibetan lifestyle in these little remote villages.
Well, they got toilet right, but hot sour? I think they mean hot shower.
This is one of our favorite places that we stayed along the route, as we had the entire place to ourselves, so we could sit in the kitchen together by the stove and have our dalbat dinner and have a solid night's sleep at about 10,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Day 3, and we were up at 6 a.m. again for our eggs and pancakes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Which we lathered up with loads of peanut butter and honey before saying goodbye to Karma and getting on the trail. One of the best things about doing less popular treks in Nepal and avoiding peak season months are the interactions with the local people, and Tsum Valley in March enabled us to have many quiet trails and guest houses. We made our way out of Chekumpar and visited a little monastery before leaving town. Today would be a fun day, making our way up the top side of Tsum Valley, which is loaded with monasteries, prayer wheels, and prayer flags as we got closer to the Tibetan border. The sun started peering out over the big peaks as we made our way up the valley. Each tiny village seemed to have another colorful monastery, which we could visit to check out the beautiful designs and decorations on the inside. It felt as if we were stepping back in time, walking through these traditional old rustic villages, with stone houses, slate roofs, and mani walls, which are stone structures made up of Buddhist prayer stones. We passed locals on horses and women carrying their reed baskets out to the fields. After an hour or two, we arrived at the Lamagun Monastery, one of the most famous in the area, which has a huge courtyard and amazing interior. We were loving the fact that in Tsum Valley we could experience these places without anybody else there, which is not always the case on the more popular Nepali treks. After Lamagun, we continued up the trail, with our sights set on making it up to Nile, which is the top village you can stay at in all of Tsum Valley. This section of the trail is easy hiking, as Nile is only 1,000 feet higher than where we stayed the night before in Chekumpar. We cruised on up past more fields, over little streams, and past more monkeys who looked down on us from the trees. We crossed suspension bridges and passed by local zos, which are a combination of half cow, half yak. This part of the trail was a joy to hike, as every half mile we would come by another tiny monastery or old stupa, decorated in prayer flags that would remind us that we were literally just a stone's throw away from Tibet. we came into Chule, the second to last village of Tsum Valley, which meant Nile was just another 10 or 15 minutes ahead. Nile appeared right ahead of us with its old homes perched above the river on the left-hand side of the trail. After entering one more monastery with a giant prayer wheel, we crossed the river one more time and climbed into Nile, which surprisingly only had one guest house that is in operation. Thankfully, this one guest house had a room for us, and we didn't have to stay in one of the tents in front of the guest house. We chowed down on a well-deserved high-carb lunch of spaghetti and fried noodles.
Thank you.
After an hour-long lunch break, we decided to head up to one of the highlights of the entire trek, Gompa. Gompa, the far point of the entire Tsum Valley Trek, is perched at over 12,000 feet, looking right at enormous peaks in Nepal and Tibetan China. The miles passed quickly, and we found ourselves on the final 300-foot climb straight up to the largest and most important monastery in all of Tsum Valley. We finally arrived at the gate of Gompa and entered in. We were greeted by one of the resident monks who lives here full-time. It was a pleasure to walk inside the wooden main room of the monastery and see the Tibetan Buddhas and decorations that have been preserved throughout the decades. The structures are typically made of stone and wood with intricately carved beams and columns. The resident monk was happy to show us around the area, and we got to walk around the paths of the monastery while looking off into the distance at the snow-capped mountains which surrounded this amazing place.
Straight back behind us here, just a few more miles, is the border with Tibet and China.
We got to hang out with a couple of the local monks for half an hour or so, as our guide chatted with them, and we soaked in the amazing views in this very remote corner of the Himalayas. It was getting on in the afternoon, so finally it was time to say goodbye to the friendly monks and retrace our steps back down the steep downhill. On the way back, we spotted a couple of Himalayan tahr, which are wild goats that live high in the Himalayas in Nepal, Tibet, India, and Bhutan. We cruised on down across the river, passed a few locals and their zos, and made it back into Nile. I dropped off our stuff and headed out for another 30 minutes of observing village life. All the local families were bringing their zos. These huge animals plodded their way along, crossing the footbridge across the river and marching their way right back up into Nile, as they knew their daily route back home by heart. I switched the dinner from dal bhat to a mixed pizza in the crowded dining hall.
Mixed pizza. Thank you. Thank you, Tule.
And then we headed over to our room to get some rest.
Power's out, but we got a Twix.
The next morning we were up early, had breakfast, and were curious how far down the valley we can make it today. Nile is definitely one of the coolest villages in Tsum Valley, given that it's the highest place to stay, and we loved how the little humble homes are all built out of rocks, right above the river. We hiked back across the suspension bridge and made our way down the trail to the monastery in Chule, which a local lady opened up for us so we could peek inside. We continued on past some zos that were decorated with colorful bells that looked like Christmas ornaments dangling from them. On the way back, we went on the east side of the river this time so that we could visit Gompa, which along with Gompa and Samagaon monasteries are the three most important monasteries in Tsum Valley. We passed several beautiful stupas on our way to Gompa, which is really a nunnery where about 80 nuns, young and old, live and practice Tibetan Buddhism. We entered the main monastery structure, and then the friendly older nun, who was showing us around, invited us into her humble abode and proceeded to offer us every snack she could think of. We shared some dried pumpkin and tea with this active 80-year-old nun who was definitely humorous and full of life, as our guide Tule was laughing constantly.
Pumpkin.
Oh, dried pumpkin?
What? I'm okay. She's very generous.
It's always such a treat to have these spontaneous interactions with locals. After an enjoyable visit to Gompa, we were back on the trail, passing more zos, donkeys, and prayer flags. We came down to Chakumpar where we'd stayed 2 nights before, and the same monkeys were still going to town on the potato patch, enjoying their free buffet. It's always a bit more comforting coming back down a trail that you have been up before, as you know what to expect. We made good time this morning as we moved our way down, losing elevation as the cold of Nile and the top of the valley were now long gone with the sun out. We made it down to Rensum Guest House, where we had lunch a couple days prior, and grabbed a much-needed boost of calories with some fried rice and potatoes with veggies.
Tule Kitchen's open. Thank you.
After lunch, we kept up a good pace, with the goal of making it all the way down to Chumling, which would get us more than halfway down Tsum Valley in one day. We arrived in Chumling. It had been a solid 14-ish mile day. We were now down at 7,000 feet, where the temps would be pleasant again at night. Tashi Delit Guest House is perched above the valley with peaks surrounding it, and is the place to stay in Chumling. We took another baby wipe shower, as we call them, to get the majority of the dust and sweat off of us, before relaxing and getting dinner with spaghetti and dal bhat.
Thank you, Tule.
In the morning, we grabbed some massive pancakes and loaded them up with peanut butter and jelly.
It is a chocolate pancake.
The trail drops steeply out of Chumling and goes across a couple big bridges on its way back to Lokpa, where we stayed on our first day trekking in Tsum Valley. We came back across the rickety metal bridges perched above the river, down below, that make you hold your breath as you walk down them, as we never know how sturdy these makeshift bridges really are. We cruised down the narrow trail, which is often built out like a staircase, that heads straight down above the river. Today we would be losing even more elevation. We would be exiting Tsum Valley and starting in on the first few miles of the Manaslu Circuit. We got to Lokpa, filled up on water, and then walked under the Tsum Valley sign and got to the trail split. When we got to the massive bridge where we would start in on the Manaslu Circuit, we were greeted by the sounds of hundreds of bells as far as we could see, with donkeys covering the trail ahead of us. After seeing so few donkey trains in the sparsely populated Tsum Valley, we were preparing ourselves now for the fact that we would be having to pass donkey trains on the narrow trail for the rest of the day. It hadn't rained much in the past couple of weeks, and the trails were really dusty as we tried our best to pass these donkey trains, which are guided by young local guys who usually make no effort to let hikers go by. Finally, we made it to Piwa, where we were glad to get off the trail for a bit as we grabbed 2 big plates of dal bhat to fill our tummies. More groups of donkeys passed by, which could be good in that they would be farther ahead, or it could be bad that we may need to overtake them again after lunch. We had several refills of our dal bhat lunch and rested for a few minutes before grabbing our packs and getting back on the dusty, donkey-filled trail. We dodged another 100 donkeys and rolled into Dang, which would be our stopping place for the day. We did laundry, which we do nearly every other day out here on the trail, and chilled out with the local workers of the guest house, before having dinner, with Cece sticking to her spaghetti and me enjoying the mixed pizza, which had tuna, tons of veggies, and lots of cheese, on this welcomed calorie bomb.
Oh, mixed pizza.
Yes.
From the chef. Thank you, chef. Yes. Oh, thank you.
We had breakfast and we were excited to get out on the trail for our first full day on the Manaslu Circuit. Tule was in good spirits this morning, as he had done the Manaslu Trek many times and had good friends along the way. We always enjoy starting around 7, which seems to be about 30 minutes to an hour before many other groups, and usually we have the trail to ourselves. We made our way up, crossing more giant bridges until we started catching up to a couple groups who had stayed in villages above us on the trail. We passed a few more donkey trains and prayed that today we wouldn't be facing hundreds of these guys on narrow sections of the trail. The Manaslu Circuit offers similar views to its neighboring trek just to the west, the Annapurna Circuit. However, the Manaslu Trek sees about 3,000 visitors a year, compared to about 150,000 trekkers that flood the Annapurna Circuit annually. We always enjoy doing hikes that have fewer people, so Manaslu is a good choice compared to Annapurna. We rode along on the dusty trail, which mostly climbed but also dropped its way down along narrow drop-offs to cross the river from time to time. We gained elevation as we passed through little villages like Bihi and Gap. We put in another solid morning and made it up to the colorful Jungle Hotel, where it was time for all three of us to load up and fill our bellies with dal bhat.
Is it good?
I'm eating it wrong.
Whatever.
After lunch, it was more climbing, passing local porters and a few more horses. We tried to do the majority of our miles before lunch, as sometimes after a big lunch, we preferred having not that many miles left ahead of us. Today we had a couple more miles of climbing before making it to nearly 9,000 feet in the village of Namrung. Once we got to Namrung, I made my usual rounds to the guest houses and found us a place to stay at the colorful little rooms at Namrung Guest House. As always, room and board doesn't break the bank here at about $3 to $7 a night, and dinner and breakfast cost about $5 to $7 a person.
Pizza!
A mixed pizza and spaghetti were our meals of choice tonight before getting some rest. For breakfast, Cece got her usual pancake and egg, and I got a chocolate pancake the size of my face,
Thank you.
which I added another 1,000 calories on top of with peanut butter and honey. We packed up and left the pretty guest houses behind us. We passed the checkpoint where the day before Tule had registered us. Today would be another solid day as we hope to make it up to the beautiful village of Samagaon, set at 11,500 feet. We always enjoy getting moving in the first hour or two of the morning, as before the sun comes up, the morning chill and fresher legs push us to move quickly up the trail. We passed groups of cows and horses on our way up and went by tiny villages where locals were plowing their fields. We cruised into the little village of Lee, and we were greeted by a couple little boys curious to see who was passing by.
Hello, namaste.
We passed our favorite, stupas with eyes, and spun the prayer wheels along the way. We made good progress in the morning, making our way up towards the village of Lo, which has a large monastery just off the main route. We marched our way across more lengthy Nepali bridges and caught up to porters who were carrying enormous loads up the trail. We hit the 10,000-foot elevation mark as we came up to the entrance of Lo, where Tule and Cece continued up the direct route, and I told them I would catch up to them after adding on the Lo monastery. It was an extra couple hundred-foot climb straight uphill, past the town to enter the monastery. Once I topped the ridge and entered the courtyard, I was greeted by about 30 young monks who were playing games. They guided me into the main structure, which was beautiful as always. However, the best part was sitting down with the monks for a few minutes to be a fly on the wall as they were enjoying playing marble soccer. But it was time to catch up with Tule and Cece on the trail ahead of me, so I told the young monks goodbye.
Bye, bye-bye. Bye.
In another 10 minutes, I'd caught up with Cece and Tule, and we saw a pack of Himalayan tar, which are classified as nearly endangered, so it's not that common to see a pack this large together on the trail. After another hour or so, we had made it up to 11,500 feet to Shaila, where we popped into a local guest house for a good 3 servings of dal bhat, the one meal that is all you can eat on the trail. We had packed in a bunch of miles before lunch, so it was just about 3 more miles up to Samagaon after lunch. It was a pretty cruiser hour or so of hiking, before we found ourselves entering one of the coolest villages of the Manaslu Circuit. At 11,600 feet, Samagaon retains its traditional charm, with stone houses that nearly all have stable areas where local zos and yaks can be kept. The village, with about a couple hundred homes, has narrow little pathways connecting all the basic homes and is full of stupas and prayer wheels. We weaved our way around the omnipresent zos and came into the middle of town, where we found a place to stay at a quiet local guest house. We put our things down and had some tea and popcorn. Before dinner nearly every day, I enjoy getting out to observe the local life. It was a nice time for me to go out packless and not have to go anywhere too fast, but take in the simple life in each village we stayed at. As soon as I got outside, it started to snow. Tule came outside and asked if I'd like to go together up towards the monastery on the far side of town. No one was out except Tule and I and the animals who were roaming through the village, making their way home. As we made our way up towards the monastery, Tule asked if I could record him for his next TikTok video, and now I could see why he wanted to join me today for my afternoon stroll. I didn't mind, and actually it was pretty funny seeing him dance and sing to his selected songs. Tule and I hiked up to the monastery and then made our way back down to the pool hall, where he wanted to stay to watch the action. I continued back down through the village, weaving in and out of the little paths, enjoying how far away this rustic Himalayan village feels from the modern world. It seems like life here is nearly unchanged, as the locals, who are 100% Buddhist, live based on the seasonal crops and their animals to survive at about 11,000 feet. If I had to choose one village as the quintessential Himalayan village on the Manaslu Circuit, this would be it. I returned back to the guest house before dinner. We got spaghetti and a mixed pizza, and unfortunately the spaghetti had some veggies that must not have been washed properly, and Cece got food poisoning, which is never fun, but at over 11,000 feet and a day or two out from the big pass is particularly challenging. The next morning we took it slowly, and we thought about adding Birienda Lake, but with Cece just hanging in there, we did not want to add any extra miles and simply try to make it up about 5 miles to Samdo. After yesterday's afternoon snow, it was a cold bluebird morning, with the surrounding peaks all being lit up with the morning sun as we looked forward to having the sunrise over the ridge and warm us up. Cece was a trooper this morning, as she was clearly not 100%, but she felt like she could still make some progress and move up the trail to the next major village. We were grateful that the trail was pretty flat for the first couple of miles and we could ease into the morning. Parts of the trail were covered in snow as the sun was just starting to peek out above the ridge to the east. A mile before Samdo, I shot ahead so I could find us a good guest house and have our room ready when Tule and Cece arrived.
Namaste. Hello, hello.
We got to Samdo and Cece could rest and recover for the rest of the day. I went out to get some snacks that Cece could have at a little local shop in town. On my way back from the shop, I stopped in Samdo's monastery to be invited in to join the monks for their dalbat lunch, which some locals from the village were serving them. Once everyone had a plate, the chanting stopped, and the only sound in the monastery was that of a dozen or so monks happily enjoying their lunches. Thankfully, we were able to get some bread and soup for lunch, which Cece could have small portions of and start getting some fuel in. After taking care of Cece in the afternoon, while she was resting later on, I went for a short walk around the tiny village. Just like the afternoon before, it started snowing and I tucked into the monastery. Sure enough, 5 hours later, the same monks were still there chanting from their compilation of scrolls. A young monk invited me to sit next to him as they continued chanting. After quietly observing the monks for a bit longer, it was time to get back to the guest house and see if Cece could have any dinner. I got her some plain rice and I had some dalbat, and we got to bed early, hoping that tomorrow she would feel good enough to move up the trail. The next morning, thankfully, Cece felt a little bit better and wanted to get up to the next major village, Dharamsala, which at 14,600 feet is the last village before the big day of going up and over Larke Pass. We were hoping that another short day today would give her some time to rest and feel even better for our pass day the following day. It was another crystal clear morning, which seemed to be the norm. We hiked across giant bridges and made our way up with views of the peaks surrounding us. There were several other groups making their way up today who we leapfrogged back and forth as we stopped for water breaks and took pictures. Tule kindly took Cece's backpack so she could focus on getting up the trail. Another mile or so in, and we were looking at Mount Manaslu, the trek's namesake mountain and the 8th highest mountain in the world, which was directly to our left-hand side. By 11 a.m., we were getting up near Dharamsala, where there were only 3 places to stay. and went ahead to examine the lodging options, which were the most basic we would see on the entire Manaslu circuit. The Larke Pass Hotel was the only one that promised us we wouldn't have to share a room with other trekkers. Our room had 4 thin mattresses on top of a sheet of plywood, which was on top of piles of rocks. The thin walls kept out the winds for the most part, and it would have to do here at this tiny outpost at 14,500 feet. Everything at the high-altitude guest house is more expensive, as donkeys have to carry everything miles and miles up the trail to get here. Just after we arrived, a team of donkeys got there too, and unloaded a bunch of goods, including firewood, which is crucial up here as the stove is a lifesaver in the bitter cold evenings and early mornings. Once all the goods were unpacked off the donkeys, the guides and the guest house managers spent the afternoon in their big tent, which the sun heats up, as they sat against the massive stockpile of blankets which trekkers could rent for $2 a night. At 14,500 feet with our lightweight sleeping bags, this was a $4 we were more than happy to shell out. In the afternoon we rested, and before dinner, like usual, I got out to stretch my legs. Today there was no real village to explore, so I just climbed up a couple hundred feet above the tiny little village to get a view of the surrounding area. Around 5 p.m. they lit the stove and everyone came out of their rooms and flocked into the dining area to stay warm. We were informed that tomorrow morning the kitchen would be open from 3 to 4:30 a.m., as all trekkers needed to get out for an early start and make it up and over Larke Pass. We chose the latest time slot possible of 4:30 a.m. to have breakfast.
Pretty basic accommodation here at 14,600 feet. Got 1, 2, 3, 4 mattresses here just spread out with a little tiny board underneath it and then a big pile of boulders. Gonna be chilly tonight. It's time for dessert in our cold, dark, rocky room.
We were up at 4:10 the next morning to get our late 4:30 a.m. breakfast. Unfortunately, Cece's stomach was not good from the soup that she ate the night before. She wanted to give it a go, as we were only a couple of days from the finish of the trek, and staying here at this rugged little outpost was not a great option for rest unless absolutely necessary. We worked together, with me carrying some of Cece's things and Tule taking her backpack. Cece really showed a lot of strength today, as we started in the frigid darkness as the first light started creeping up on the horizon behind us. The sun coming up is always such a relief on these early mornings when you are moving, fighting through the cold, and trying just to keep yourself warm. The sun popped out from behind the east ridge and gave us some much needed warmth as we made our way up towards Larke Pass. Despite Cece not feeling well, she was still faster than many of the people on the trail, and we started catching up to groups right and left who had started 30 minutes to an hour before us. After hiking the 3 passes Everest Loop, the final ascent up to Larke Pass was much easier than we expected, as it was a fairly gentle approach and we were very acclimatized after nearly a month in Nepal. We came across a couple of snowy patches and suddenly the prayer flag strewn all over the upcoming rocks told us that we were getting really close to the pass. In another couple minutes, we arrived at the official sign of Larke Pass. At 16,700 feet, it was easily the highest point on our Tsum Valley Manaslu combo trek. Cece, Tule, and I grabbed a picture or two at the sign and took in the amazing views as other groups of excited trekkers arrived at the coveted pass. After a few more minutes enjoying the sun, blue skies, and being at the high point for the trek, it was time to get moving as we wanted to get all the way down to Bimthing at about 12,200 feet today and get some rest. We stayed high for a while, walking along a ridgeline that rolled down under the bright morning sun. Then the trail started dropping down quickly as it makes its way down to high camp at 14,500 feet, where we were more than ready to get some lunch. We were relieved to have gotten Cece up and over the pass and to be heading downhill towards hopefully a little better and less frigid room than the night before in Dharamsala. After lunch, I took a turn carrying her backpack. We were grateful to roll into Bimthing after another hour or two. We got a quiet room in this little guest house and relaxed for the rest of the afternoon before some dal bhat and soup for dinner.
Dal bhat. Power.
The next morning, thankfully, Cece was feeling a little bit better, and we knew that with a good day today on the trail, it could be our last day of hiking on the trek. No 4:30 a.m. breakfast today, but we welcomed a couple more hours of sleep and had breakfast at our usual 6:30 a.m. Left our colorful guest house and walked through the village of Bimthing. Just after the village, the trail starts dropping down out of town, and we crossed more bridges over rushing rivers. We then dropped into the forest, which was a nice change of pace, as we had been out in the exposed terrain for a long time now. Suddenly there were signs of spring with loads of pink rhododendron flowers lining the trails. The end was getting near, and we were eating up the downhill miles. We worked our way along, nearly washed out stream beds and crossed paths, with local men shepherding their herds of goats up the trail. There were more bridges to cross as we made our way down the trail, which would soon turn into a four-wheel drive road. We made it down into the village of Goa, where it was time for lunch, before our last push of the day to get us down to Tilche, where we hoped we could snag some transportation.
Thank you. Boiled eggs. Thank you.
After lunch, we were cruising, knowing that Tilche was only about an hour ahead of us. And before we knew it, we were entering the streets of Tilche and crossing over the river for one final time. After a few minutes of negotiations, we and another Nepali man agreed to share the Jeep to get us down to Darapani. We jumped inside the Jeep and bounced down the roads for the next 3+ hours. Of course, we stopped to pick up a couple of other passengers, get tea, and chat with some friends of our driver. But we couldn't complain as we were making progress towards Kathmandu. After a night in Darapani and another 8-hour van ride the next day, we were back in Nepal's capital, Kathmandu. Having completed the combo of two of Nepal's most cultural and scenic treks, Tsum Valley and Manaslu. It had been a challenging 115-mile route with 30,000 feet of climbing in the rugged Himalayas. CC, Tule, and I had worked together to make it through the seldom visited region of northern Nepal. Nepal is a country that is truly one of a kind. Tsum Valley gave us a glimpse into how the local Tibetan people have lived for ages, while moving through their tiny rustic villages. The Manaslu area avoids the big crowds of Everest Base Camp in the Annapurna Circuit and had taken us up and around Mount Manaslu, the 8th tallest mountain in the world, while giving us big-time Himalayan views and the classic tea-house-to-tea-house infrastructure of a Nepali trek. The combo of Tsum Valley and the Manaslu Circuit is a fantastic Nepali trek to experience the hospitality and scenic beauty of the Himalayas.